Welcome back everyone, it is Aric from Rare and today we are back in today's deck profile checking out the brand new Origin Dialga VSTAR. I know this thing has a crazy VSTAR power that a lot of people are curious to see if it will, do anything competitively, so I definitely wanted to check this deck out and see how it would stack up. And we already did check out Origin Palkia, so it's kind of fair we check out Dialga here as well. But before we get any deeper in today's video, if you guys do need any cards for the upcoming Astral Radiance set, our friends over at flipsidegaming.com are still taking pre-orders on sealed product, and you can use coupon code RARECANDY at checkout to get 10% off, yes, even on booster boxes and ETBs, and get free shipping as well. And also, if you want an even bigger discount, all of Rare Candy's patrons, even the lowest pledge tier, have their own exclusive code that actually gets them 15% off too. So if you are still thinking about picking up Astral Radiance cards, I will have a link to that down below in the description. Let's jump into the stack profile and see how the new Origin Dialga VSTAR is going to look. So the first Pokemon we're going to check out is actually going to be the new Diancie, also coming out in the new Astral Radiance set. This is definitely going to be our ideal starter of choice, mainly for this ability. As long as this Pokemon is your active, your opponent can't play any supporter cards that targets your bench Pokemon. So yeah, that blocks a couple supporters, but the big one this is going to prevent is going to be, of course, Boss's Orders. And the reason this card is so important is because you really just need time with Dialga. You need several turns to get set up and amass enough energy to start taking big one-shots and use that very powerful VSTAR power as well. And Diancie does have an attack that, believe it or not, is like kind of situationally decent as well. It has Spike Draw for a colorless energy just 20, and you draw 2 cards. So again, we're not really doing too much attacking with Dialga in the early game, and sometimes if we do need to just refill our hand a little bit, this can be one way we can try to do that while we're buying some time to set up our Dialga. And of course, by playing the 4 count, this ensures that we can find these when we need them, and we pretty much actually always want 2 in play, just because if your opponent has an escape rope, that would allow them to then boss. So we always want 2 Diancies, and playing the 4 count is just the best way of ensuring we always have these when we want them. Up next from there though, of course, we do have Origin Dialga V. We definitely need some copies of this before we evolve into our VSTAR. Not a whole lot to really say about this card. I believe the first attack is accelerate 2 metal from discard to this Pokemon. If I do remember correctly, it's an attack I've honestly not used yet, just because a lot of times if you do use this attack, going second on your first turn, a lot of times you'll just get return KO'd anyways. So you probably won't use this too often, but it is an option if your opponent does have a bit of a slow start. And its other attack, pretty mediocre too, just 3 metal and a colorless for a flat 180. But more importantly, we of course have 3 copies of Dialga VSTAR in the deck. This is going to be our main attacker here. It has 2 different attacks here. I know the VSTAR power has been the one that has gotten most of the attention, but honestly, Dialga's first attack also not bad for just a colorless energy, just 40 plus 40 more for each metal energy attached to Dialga. I really like this attack for a number of reasons. It's very flexible, meaning that it allows you sometimes just to get a little bit of chip damage in, but of course can scale to one-shot anything in the format. And taking those big knockouts at some point is actually part of the core strategy with this deck. But before we talk about that more, let's check out this VSTAR power. It's an attack for a whopping 4 metal and a colorless, does 220, but then you take an additional turn, which is absolutely nuts. So I think a lot of the times our path to victory is going to be, we take a few turns to amass a ton of energy for this first attack, and once we're finally ready to start attacking, we throw this guy up, take a big knockout with the first attack. If you're not getting one-shotted, you then proceed to use this VSTAR power potentially on something on the bench like a Crobat V, and then from there you just use your main attack one more time to steamroll whatever is left in front of you, assuming you're attacking into multi-prizers each time. So that's going to be your general path to victory, but we definitely need some other cards to kind of help set up this whole strategy. Another very important part of the deck is going to be a 2/2 Bronzong line. Of course, Bronzong has that ability that allows you to move a metal energy attached to one of your Pokemon to another. So we can use things like Metal Saucer and then move those energies over to our Dialga VSTAR, or if we're using something like Zacian V, which we also do play, after using Intrepid Sword, we can move those energies over to our Dialga and start going in and doing a ton of damage. And speaking of Zacian, this is actually a pretty important card that I debatably wouldn't mind even going up to a second copy of, but we're actually not even really attacking with Zacian, even though Brave Blade is a really solid attack, 230, you can't attack on the next turn, but Intrepid Sword's really the star of the show. As I mentioned, we're going to spend the first like 3-ish turns hiding behind Diancie's, and ideally ending each turn with Intrepid Sword to draw the top 3 cards of our deck, and then attach any metal energies we find there to Zacian. We're basically just trying to amass a lot of energy as quickly as possible to start just blowing through anything with our VSTARs here. We also have a copy of Manaphy. Manaphy is going to be good against those decks with the bench sniping attacks like Jolteon VMAX and Rapid Strike Urshifu. And if we are taking 3 to 4 turns to get our strategy set up, that does give our opponent time to potentially get in some chip damage on our Dialga for whenever we start attacking with it. So we want to take that option away from the Rapid Strike and Jolteon players. And then to round out our Pokemon line, we have some staples in the form of Crobat V and Lumineon V to bail us out of a dead hand if we find ourselves without a supporter or need to dig a little bit harder in a given turn with Crobat. Heading into our trainer cards, we have 4 copies of Professor's Research. This is definitely going to be our main supporter of choice. We discard our hand and draw 7, of course. And being a metal deck and playing things like Metal Saucer, we don't mind discarding metal energies in the process. We also have 3 copies of Boss's Orders, of course, to choose what we want to attack into. And to round out our supporter cards, we just have 2 copies of Morny just for a little bit of hand disruption. Ideally, we want to lean a little bit more heavily on research in the opening turns. And towards the late game, once we are ready to pivot into Dialga, we go Marnie, ideally take a knockout, and then from there we sweep them with the VSTAR Power and a second attack from its first attack. We do have a couple of stadium cards in the deck. One is going to be Training Court just to get basic energy back from discard into our hand. We don't really want to miss energy attachments with this deck. And if one of our Dialga V-Stars somehow does go down, more than likely it's taking a good bit of energy with it. So having a counter stadium that also can get back some of that energy definitely could be good. But our other stadium that we're playing right now is going to be 1 copy of Collapse Stadium. So of course, this is going to limit both players' bench Pokemon to 4 Pokemon. So this is going to be good at clearing Crobat or Lumineon off our field. I find that we usually have at least one of them benched at some point. And with decks like Origin Palkia that are going to be running around after this set comes out, limiting their damage output is going to be really important to make sure Dialga can take a hit to try to sweep your opponent. So debatably, I almost wouldn't even mind changing the Training Court to a second Collapse, but then on the flip side, I do find myself liking to bump the Collapse sometimes with Training Court to bench certain things. So feel free to play around with the stadiums. I actually think there's a few different ones you could go with. There's even like Jubilife Village or Temple of Sinnoh. Also both seem pretty solid here, but these are the ones I am trying out currently at least. Heading into our item cards, we have 4 copies of Quick Ball just to discard a card from our hand and get a basic Pokemon from deck. And of course, we have the 4 copies of Ultra Ball to go with it, discard 1 additional card, but we get any Pokemon out of our deck. So not only can it help get us set up, but of course we can get our evolutions like Bronzong and our V-Stars as well. And speaking of discarding effects, we do have our 4 copies of Metal Saucer, just because this thing is still in the format and it's going to be very important to help our V-Stars get up and running and start smacking our opponent for a ton of damage. We attach a metal energy from discard to one of our benched metal Pokemon. And even if that's not Dialga, of course, we do have the Bronzong to be able to move that energy over to our Dialga whenever we're ready. We have 2 copies of Choice Belt in the deck just to do 30 more damage to our opponent's Pokemon V. A lot of times this is going to be the difference between needing an additional energy or not, and sometimes that's really big at ensuring we can take some of those one-hit KOs with this deck. And our other tool card of choice is going to be 2 copies of Air Balloons just to give our Pokemon 2 less retreat. A lot of our Pokemon do have kind of clunky retreat costs like Bronzong, Dialga, Zacian. So being able to move those out of the active and throw Diancie active is going to be really, really important for this deck. But even though we are playing the Air Balloons, we also have a copy of Switch, as well as a copy of Escape Rope to round out our trainer cards. Again, we are very reliant on just quickly getting Diancie thrown up into the active, so we definitely need a lot of ways at making sure we can do that. And to round out our deck list, we have 13 basic metal energies. I know that is going to be a lot, guys, but like I said, we are going to be reliant for the first several turns using Intrepid Sword pretty much every turn of the game. And every time we do that, we do probably want at least 1 energy because Dialga does need quite a few energy if it does want to start taking big one-hit knockouts. So being able to ensure those extra attachments is going to be really, really important for this deck. So that's where I'm at right now with the Origin Dialga V-Star deck. This kind of in a way reminds me of the old Primal Groudon EX deck where you kind of hide behind these Wobbuffets every turn until you're ready to get going. And this kind of has the same energy. You hide behind Diancie for the first like 3-ish turns of the game. And then by then you usually have a good bit of energy and you're ready to start smacking your opponent for a ton of damage with your V-Star. But that being said, I'm definitely curious what you guys in the community are thinking. What do you think about this Dialga V-Star deck? Do you think this archetype is going to be good, or is this VSTAR Power just a gimmick? So be sure to let me know down below in the comment section. What do you think about this archetype as well as the deck list shown off today? But of course, if you guys did enjoy today's content, if you can, remember to smack that like button. And if you want to take that support to the next level, you guys can also become a patron at patreon.com/rarecandytcg or pick up some merch at rarecandytcg.com. Links to those will be down below in the description. But as always, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.